to thank each and every one of you for coming to the work session for the city of South Fulton. At this time, Mr. Kerr, would you call the roll?
Mayor William Bill Edwards.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mark Baker. Councilmember Catherine Rao. Councilmember Carmelita Gumbs.
Present.
Councilmember Helen Z. Willis.
Here.
Councilmember Naima Gilliard.
Here.
Councilmember Rosie Jackson.
Here.
And Councilmember Khalid. Here. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Would you call the first item, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. As requested by Municipal Court, we're switching the order.
You don't have to, they're here now.
Okay. So Chris, we're back on schedule. The first item is Municipal Court quarterly update, and that's being given by our Chief Judge, Sally.
I think you did that. Oh, thank you, sir.
I want to remind everybody we have a pretty robust agenda today.
I'm gonna be quick, man. I know that was for me. How do I start it? Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is just kind of a quarterly update just to let you know what's going on in the municipal court. I try to time them somewhere around the time that I send out the actual quarterly report from the court. So I sent that out yesterday, and so today is the quarterly update. Just a couple of things to bring to your attention. Third quarter highlights, upcoming projects and programs, and a discussion regarding legislative intent that will be handled by our city solicitor. So third quarter highlights. First, I wanted to highlight some new additions to our team. We have Miss Tiffany Henry, who's been hired as our programs and probation manager. Miss Henry, can you stand for me? She comes to us with Georgia Post certification, a master's in forensic psychology, a bachelor's in criminology, and 10 years of experience in mental health programming and probation. And she is responsible, along with Ms. Jones, for the implementation of our pretrial diversion program, along with other programs that we want to do in the future. We also hired a new court clerk. Her name is Mrs. Tiffany Kinslow. Mrs. Kinslow comes to us with 15 years of experience in both municipal court, state court, and superior court. She was previously a clerk in Norcross and Sandy Springs in Metro. So we're happy to have them on the team. The next temporary addition to our team. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Donald for allowing the municipal court to pilot the South Fulton Fellows program. And our intern is Ms. Jessica Swords. Ms. Swords has been with us all summer. She's a rising second-year law student at John Marshall Law School, and she has assisted us in various projects, legal researching and writing. She assisted with our pretrial diversion program, and she's assisted us in developing our first municipal court newsletter. So we are very, very proud of Ms. Swords' work with us this summer. We certainly wish her all of the best. This is actually her last week working with us before she returns to school, so I wanted to make sure that she had an opportunity to meet the council before she returns back to school. Okay, so our new court programs that we piloted this quarter, first is our Second Chance South Fulton. That's our municipal court pretrial diversion program. Ms. Jones heads that program, and I will tell you that I think Ms. Henry told me that we had almost 100 people already signed up through the program, and so the program is very robust. People are taking advantage of it. We've had awesome results through the program, particularly for our young people in our community who are able to enter the program, complete the requirements, and leave the program with no criminal record. And so we're certainly excited about that. The second program, I know Mr. Donald always talks about me letting out the secret sauce, but Mr. Donald, I have to tell you, Councilman Khalid came to court the day that we were actually launching the program, so the secret sauce was unintendedly so I had to address it since he kind of snuck up on us, and the first day that we actually gave people the green team assignment was the day that Councilman Khalid decided to visit. And so what it is it's our community service program. Right now we partner with the city's Parks and Recreation Department to clean up clean up the trash in the parks. So it reduces fines, rate of $15 an hour, which is incredibly progressive. But you pay $15 an hour towards your fine, offsets your fine by picking up trash in the park. That will certainly expand once we bring in our public works department, but right now they're not with the city. And so we're partnering with the department that's already here to pick up trash. And I will tell you, the day that Mr. Khalid was there, the rule is if you mess up our community, you clean up our community. And so particularly with dumping, trash dumping, there is generally mandatory green team enrollment. The only exception is if you want to pay us at that $15 an hour for the additional time that you would have to work. So certainly most people are taking advantage of the green team whether they want to or not. But if you mess up our community, the rule is that you're going to have to be forced to clean it up. So other new court program is we're rolling out a municipal court newsletter. It's going to be distributed in court. There's a lot of dead time. Sometimes it's dead time, sometimes it's just waiting in terms of just the process. And so Ms. Jones, along with our intern, Ms. Swords, put together a really, really good newsletter that outlines some basic court procedures, terms, calendars, contact information. And that information will be available to defendants as they walk in. We have a separate one for victims, so that they get a different one that says some different things on it. But you have some reading material while you're waiting so that the process is explained to you. It describes our Second Chance Our Fulton program, our green team, and other pertinent information. So I guess I have to address the Black Girl Magic, the media coverage that's surrounding the court. We've gotten significant media coverage as a result of the story that I think was brought to Ms. Jones' attention. I don't think any one of us really thought about it much until it kind of was brought to our attention, and I think that it's given the city some very good publicity. There's some additional media opportunities, including I know the mayor has again let out the secret sauce, so I got to come in here and address it, that HBO's Vice News is interested in doing this segment on the court, and we'll be visiting shortly to facilitate that. So upcoming projects and programs, there are going to be some IT enhancements. First is our online court calendars. I know that several of the council members have asked about that. We had an in-person meeting actually with our vendor, and they indicated that they would be able to facilitate that online court calendar access. So we should be available by the end of the year, if not sooner, but that just requires some linking with our website and IT and all of that. Then we want to also introduce text message reminders. Defendants will have to opt in when they receive their citation initially, but then we're looking to partner with a vendor that will give people text message reminders, just like you do if you go to the dentist or the doctor or whatever. The ultimate goal is to bring down our FTA rates and ultimately reduce people who get bitch warrants or things like that because they don't show up to court.
What's FTA?
FTA is failure to appear. And so if you fail to appear to a court session, the penalty can be as high as a bench warrant being issued. There can be other penalties like, you can get your driver's license suspended, things of that nature. And so in order to bring that rate down, we figure let's remind people as much as possible about their court dates so that they show up. Okay, this is something that I wanted to talk to. I talked to Mr. Donald about it briefly, but there's been an opportunity that's been presented. As you know, we use East Point Jail to house our municipal detainees. And because of the recent law regarding bail reform, it is a very complicated issue. But we really do need to have in-person hearings on Saturday. We were already on the forefront of that because I just kind of believe in researching and kind of knowing the law trends. And so we were already doing Saturday courts, but you'll find that in Metro Atlanta, some of the smaller jurisdictions haven't been doing it, and now they have to. And so obviously the financial burden on operating a court 6 days a week is significant, as you know. And so what we are looking to do, I've met with the chief judge at East Point, Judge Rashida Oliver, and also the assistant city manager at East Point, and they want to partner with us to do Saturday courts. And so what we would do is alternate Saturdays. We would always hold the court sessions in East Point, but we would alternate Saturdays. That would, Councilman Jackson, bring down the cost associated with running the courts. We would use their staff one Saturday, our staff one Saturday, and we would alternate that to help everybody involved. Certainly that's a pretty lengthy and legally complex issue, and so I'm bringing it to you for discussion now, because if this is something that we want to do, we need to get our city attorney involved, because there probably will be between 5 and 10 agreements. I'm sure there'll be an IGA, a mutual aid, different contracts and things like that, that we would need to kind of delve into, just for us to kind of get the process going. So if that's something that the council is interested in, then certainly we can communicate with the city attorney to facilitate all of those contractual relationships and agreements. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jones for a brief discussion on legislative intent.
Good evening, council, mayor, manager, everyone here. I wanted to, when the judge mentioned to me that she was giving a quarterly report, I hope it was the most appropriate time to bring something to the attention of council to determine, as the council's will is, to move forward with it. And it relates to our code enforcement court and our environmental court. It's one of those things that you would not know unless someone shared it with you. So we have adopted in the city the Fulton County codes. And so twice a month, we have people come before us that was cited by our excellent code enforcement team. And they must appear before us regarding the code violations. And I can tell just from sitting there that some of those things are antiquated. They're old. They're things that came over from Fulton County that may need to be addressed again, and that will be up to you all completely. I'll give you some examples. Last week, we had 3 cases of teenagers or companies dumping trash rather than putting it in the trash can where it's supposed to. Our great code enforcement team investigated it, got a call from someone, found out who it belonged to, found them, cited them, brought them in. They're on the green team. That's great work. We want more of that. But they also have had to cite either by being called to out on their own or by a complaint about things like signage on windows. So the requirement right now is that only 1/4 of a window can be covered with words. And those words have to do with the info about the business. And so there's a lot of limitations to it. And so if you have a storefront with 3 windows versus having a whole building, you can have a whole different range of wordage and verbiage on there. We're seeing it mostly on the old National Corridor, where we have a bulk of our businesses. So we have, and so the best example that I can give you, and I apologize for not bringing more copies, but I'm happy to pass these around. If a business has stuck to their window with the words that stick on the glass, whatever they want, they will be cited. If a business next door has one of those step and repeats, right, that cover the entire window, pushed against the window, but not attached to the window, they're not in violation of the rule. I don't know what the goal and the purpose and the legislative intent, which is why the judge called it that, of that rule or law or ordinance was. Maybe it was safety, maybe it was, I don't know. And I'm sure the former commissioner knows. But whatever the rules were, it is at the point that I believe it would be helpful for the council to give me guidance as your solicitor on what types of things you want, and the best way to do that is by passing ordinances. And if I can be, and I'll finish with this, just have a recommendation that you can feel free to disregard. Our code enforcement team is excellent, so sitting down with them and getting their direct recommendations on what are good and bad code enforcement will be helpful. This is a great opportunity to engage citizens and the business owners about what types of things makes us business friendly, and this is not an urgent need. Right? This is something that we can take our time with and do, and I'm happy to give as much input as you need from examples that we have in the court in order to make sure that our code, our environmental code, is as good as possible. Yes, may I approach? That's an example from a live case.
Any questions? I will tell you, Councilman Khalid, and others on national, that would be intent of that ordinance is to allow police officers to see into the facility. And they would drive by in their car or something like that. You all know a long time ago, we talked about it when we had 20 grand and all that. And there was a Winn-Dixie, I think it was. Winn-Dixie had totally covered their windows. And it was impossible for an officer to see in as he cruised by. So that was the impetus for why we did it. So we can change it, it's not a problem, but it was a safety issue.
And it can remain, we just want to make it consistent. So then the step and repeat should then also be as illegal as the window coverings, right? So that I can be consistent among.
Well, I think that's what got hired, because they would push, you could actually take the sign and put it on something and place it back off from the window, and it would be perfectly legal. So it was just on the window itself. Go ahead, Ms. Wood.
So, I know you're a business owner, Solicitor Jones, so what would be some good recommendations? Because I agree with Mayor, it's a safety issue and also an aesthetic issue. We don't want, our community looking like a jungle with everybody doing their own signage thing. So can you give us, some suggestions?
So it probably would need a whole section of time that would be better determined later. Also, I definitely think it's a cultural thing. I kind of think it's up to this body to decide. So if you were talking about shoplifting, I can tell you about other cities and what their penalties are and what's appropriate, right? And my own recommendation. Code is a little bit different. It's quasi-criminal. So although I prosecute them, I would be happy to bring in examples of cases where each time a case came in, I said, well, I got to move forward because this is what the law says. However, it's not exactly what I think the intent was. So maybe giving you those examples as time goes on, like the one that I gave in a longer setting, will be great. And I'm happy to sit down with anybody one-on-one if you want more examples, or do it in front of the whole body, whatever this body would prefer. Can I say one thing before I sit down? The judge gave a great introduction of the grade team, but we have to give credit to Mr. Donald because he called me in his office, said we're doing this, made it happen, and now that's why we have a grade team. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We believe in giving kudos where kudos are due. So that's it. Many questions about the presentation?
Well, I think we can sit back down. Thank you so much, Judge.
Thank you.
Mr. Burke?
Your next item is a solid waste collections presentation being made by the purchasing manager, Anthony Kerr.
Mr. Kerr?
Good evening, Council, Mayor, City Manager. I'd like to start off by bringing the Council's attention that the staff noticed some grammatical errors in some of the package, and we've amended those and include that in the pack that's available to the Council.
Can you speak in the mic?
You may need to pull your mic down a little bit.
Excuse me. All right, this presentation is regarding the solid waste collection matter. The city of South Fulton consists of approximately 100 residents, making up approximately 35,000 households, and covers approximately 86 square miles. The city determined that it was in its best interest to us to secure solid waste collection services on behalf of its residents to ensure more consistency and reliability in the services. To that end, the city passed an ordinance on March 27, 2018, allowing for the city to engage in this waste collection matter. That ordinance established the need for residential, commercial, yard waste, and recycling services. It also prescribed the fees that could be charged. It established the RFP process and the minimum provider standard. It also required the providers to provide monthly and annual reports, and it set standards for negligence and hazardous materials. In furtherance of the city's goals, we issued RFP number 18003, which was for solid waste collection and recycling services. When that solicitation went out, 3 vendors responded. Advanced Disposal Services responded, Waste Industries responded, and BFI Waste Services, doing business as Republic Services, responded. Upon review of all the responses and proposal, Advanced Disposal Services was identified as the most responsible and responsive provider. The competitive process that the city goes through is a 6-step process, and it applies to all solicitations over $25,000. Any solicitation over $25,000 is competitively sourced, and that begins with the discovery process, where the departments would identify the need. We develop the scope. From there, it moves on to the solicitation process, where we put the RFP document, we draft the document, put it out in the street, and allow vendors to submit proposal in response to that. We then take in the proposals. We set up an evaluation team that go over those proposals and make recommendations as to which vendor is most responsible and most responsive. And from there, it's up to this council to, we make a recommendation to this council, and it's up to this council to go ahead and select the vendor. Now, as part of the selection protocol, we set up a team of, we set up a selection committee consisting of members from different departments throughout the city, finance, in this particular solicitation, finance, Parks and Recreation was involved, representative from a few other city departments were involved. The committee is made up of 5 independent members. They all review the proposals. They each judge the proposals independently and submit their findings or submit their tabulations to the procurement manager, myself. And I consult with them, I tabulate their responses and put them together. That forms the recommendation that is then made to this body. And the vendor with the highest grade from all 5 reviewers does get the recommendation. Now, the factors that the city outlined as important in the solicitation was local business participation, meaning the city has an interest in seeing local businesses benefit from this solicitation, and the city had an interest in seeing the current providers continue to have an opportunity with this new solicitation. Another consideration the city had was equipment. How will these services be provided? The city wanted to see new vehicles, and they wanted to see new trash cans and new equipment being used in the services. And finally, and maybe one of the most important factors, was the cost proposal. What is the value that we're going to pass on to the residents, and what will the nature of the services be? In terms of vendor responses, in terms of equipment and operation, advanced disposal in response to the city's concerns in RFP, they represented that they will be using all new equipment and all new trash cans beginning day 1 of services. Waste Industries, they made no representations of using any new materials or any new trash cans. As for Public Services, they indicated they will roll out new trash cans within an 8 to 15 week period, but made no representation as to new trucks. In terms of cost of services, Advanced Disposal had an annual total cost of $8,185,800 per 35,000 households. Waste Industries had a total cost of $7,362,600 per household. The Public Services had a total cost of $12,700,800 per household. This what you're seeing here is a tabulation of the evaluators. And as stated before, the evaluators, they had an evaluation criteria as outlined in one of the memos to council. One of the factors considered was their responsiveness to the proposal, which that was weighted. their operations and their plan of how they were going to provide those services to the city. That was weighted. Local vendor participation to address the city's concern with making sure that local businesses and local providers had an opportunity under this RFP. That was also weighted. The cost proposal and local business, whether or not the vendor was a local business or had local business ownership. All those factors were weighted and graded individually by all 5 evaluators. When those totals were tallied up, Advanced Disposal came in as the most responsive and responsible provider. In consideration of Advanced Disposal Services as the most responsive and responsible, we considered their responsiveness to the actual RFP, the scope of services itself, and we also considered the city's desires and the city's wishes in putting out this RFP. And those considerations were their plan to use new equipment, local service providers having opportunities within the RFP itself, and whether or not they identified those local providers and made any attempts to engage in business with them. Advanced Disposal made the most responsive and the most persuasive representations as to those considerations. As far as waste industries, they did have the most competitive cost proposal, meaning they would have provided services at the lowest cost. However, they had no plans for new equipment. They made no representations of any new equipment as requested in the RFP document itself. And they made no representations or no indication of engaging in small or local businesses. So they were not deemed as the most responsive or the most responsible. As for Republic Services, they had the least competitive of the cost proposals, and they did indicate, they did make an indication of new trash cans, but no indication of new vehicles. And they were not as complete in their indication of local business and small business participation. Based on the foregoing and considering the city's objectives and the city's desires and the evaluation and all their tabulations, I made the conclusion as a purchasing manager that Advanced Disposal was the most responsive and the most responsible bidder, and that is my recommendation to this board, that the contract be awarded to them. And open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. I'm sorry. Okay, Ms. Stancil, she got what she needed. Councilwoman Willis?
Yes. Thank you for your thorough analysis and report. I just have 2 questions, and I'm going by what we requested for the RFP. So I understand the procurement solicitation was done as a response to the RFP. Section 7.6 addresses community outreach and education to the community. Do you have any feedback from the procurement process on how the recommended vendor is going to, or did they respond?
They did respond. I could supplement with more complete information if the council would request that. However, they did indicate that they will be providing newsletters to the residents, informing them of, for example, if any changes in schedule, informing them of what would qualify as recyclable materials, and instructions of how to put out their trash and collection times and changes in those aspects. All 3 vendors did provide their statement of what they will do in terms of community outreach and community information.
Okay, Okay, did they give any feedback on whether or not they will assist with any community cleanups?
No, but that was not a part of the that was not a requirement for responsiveness under the RFP document itself.
Okay, I'll go back and look because I thought it was. The other thing, the other section I want to address, section 5.3 of the RFP, is just a one-liner, but we asked for them to give us a response on senior discount, on a senior discount plan. Was there any feedback on that? That's in the RFP.
I think it's include, so I think all of those things were weighted within the responses, the senior RFP, the cleanup, all of those activities. But of the three, they're weighted on their responsiveness. And so let's say, for example, and I don't have this information in front of me, but I think the outreach one is one that stood out to me. When we looked at all three, some would do everything that is a newsletter, public engagement to have people come out, mailers, et cetera, while another may say, we're going to do something fairly vague and we'll continue to do outreach, or as we deliver, we'll leave a note. You follow what I'm saying? So based on their responses, the panel and our procurement team weighted that. Okay. And so each individual may have responded yes or no, depending on their overall proposal.
Okay, so there was no, I gave me a summary information, I appreciate it, but is there any plans is there a senior plan included in this recommendation?
Pretty sure.
Because that is an RFP, that's in the scope of the RFP, and we did ask the RFP for them to provide a plan.
Yeah, I think, so the short answer is yes, but through the contract negotiation, we have to define that. So okay. I think they had a proposal. That's one part of it. But then remember, once selected, we then have to enter into contract negotiations, and based on each one of those segments, that's when you finalize those pieces. So I guess so we're waiting their proposal versus the final contract will detail all of those portions.
Okay.
But the short answer is yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay, Councilwoman Gunn.
Hello and welcome to the city.
Thank you.
My first question is, why was there so little response from vendors? You're saying that it's only was 3 people that responded to the RFP. How long was it advertised and what outlets?
The solicitation process is a 105-day process, and this solicitation in particular was handled by Fulton County. However, I believe they advertised it on their website, and it was also on the Georgia State Registry. As far as the number of respondents, I cannot say why some vendors chose not to respond, but all of the service providers in the state had an equal opportunity, and only 3 took advantage of that opportunity.
Okay, I want to yield to Councilman Lee.
I wanted to say, I think that it might be because we got rid of the zones. We had debated doing zones for smaller vendors. But I guess anyone who bidded on this had to have the capacity to do it for the whole city. Is that true?
Not necessarily have the capacity. Well, it was advertised as an exclusive opportunity for the residential vendor. And that residential vendor then had the obligation to engage local smaller vendors to subcontract. So in theory, any smaller vendor could have submitted a proposal, and in their small business plan could have indicated how they would have partnered with other service providers to make the service happen.
But in their proposal, they would have had to have a plan to provide service for 35,000 homes.
They would have. Yes and no. They would have the exclusive right to provide services to 35,000 households. Then in their small business plan, they were encouraged to engage with other local providers. One of the considerations going into the RFP itself was to make sure that the current providers still had an opportunity to participate in the opportunity. So any of them could have partnered and come up with a group and responded to the RFP. They just did not take advantage of the opportunity to do so.
Also, you mentioned that there were 5 independent representatives that were on the panel. How did you all go about selecting those individuals for the evaluation process?
One of the criteria would be what departments would have been affected by it. And finance always has a representative there. Parks and Recreation had a representative there. But it's based on what departments would be impacted by the solicitation itself.
Okay. And was that the leadership, or was it junior staff, or that was part of the evaluation process?
Actually, we had to look within our city who had done this before. So there were staff that had done that before. So we had one representation from finance, we eliminated from the first go that the CFO, the city manager was never to be part of that. So we were completely out of the arrangement of the evaluation. So we had one representation from finance, we had one from recreation, we had one from fire, and we had one from community development services, then we had one from Fulton County. All these ones had already done before the evaluation.
Okay.
They had
that was my next
experience.
question. Was there anyone from Fulton County? Okay, and one last question. I know in the correspondence that we received regarding local preference, how do you determine, or can you tell me exactly what is meant by no local presence?
Local presence, whether or not they had a facility or operation within the city of South Fulton.
Within the city of South Fulton?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions.
We're going to go with Councilwoman Rao, and we're going to get Councilwoman Willis and we'll conclude this conversation.
Question, I know this is focused on the 35,000 households. I'd like some more information relative to the commercial businesses in our city and how that being addressed. And also, I know you can't speak to it today, but I think it would be beneficial for the council to have a summary page of the key pieces relative to the selected vendor, however that, how we proceed with that in terms of the senior discounts and some of the other things, just so we have an understanding. If it's just a one pager, I think it would be beneficial.
Similar to what you saw before, but expanded by categories, right?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
just a general snapshot, just high level. Thank you. And then answer the questions relative to the commercial properties in the city.
And does Councilwoman Rao asking for that to be done by writing, or are you asking that?
I mean, if you can provide some information now, I like it. I know it is focused on the residential piece only, is that correct?
Well, but
The commercial, the commercial services and rollout services were included in the RFP document or in the solicitation document itself. However, unlike the residential portion, the commercial and the rollout portions were not intended to be exclusive rights. So we asked all vendors to submit cost proposals for both rollout and commercial services. And the city will then decide, based off a number of factors, which provider to go with. But all 3 vendors did submit cost proposals for commercial services.
And so no decision has been made on that piece yet, is that what
That
you're
is
saying?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
I got Councilwoman Willis, and I'm going to give some latitude to Councilman Lee, and we will conclude with you. Yeah, y'all gotta, I'm trying to keep this thing on pace. And if I say it was the last conversation, it's the last conversation. Go ahead.
Well, 2 things. Commercial, from my understanding, when I'm doing the legislation process with the tax commissioner, they will not be collecting on our behalf for commercial. That is going to have to be handled totally different from residential. Second of all, I want to thank the city manager for expediting this process and having the county take over the procurement process, because they have a well-oiled engine in the county, a robust procurement team. I'm very confident in that process because I've attended some of their procurement training, and I am confident that this process was done fairly and it was professional. So where we initially tried to roll this process out, we tried to do it internally within the city. We didn't have the bandwidth. It was just chaotic. And I think it was smart that, because this is going to fall on the public works, that you allow the county to take over this process. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Khalid and Mr. Clerk, would you call the next item?
Thank you.
Wait, no.
Mr. Kerr.
Mr. You said the clerk to call. His last name is Kerr. So he thought he was saying, it's fine. One of the things that I have been really I'd asked for repeatedly throughout the RFP process was some part of the scoring to be around safety and wages, because I have heard concerns from the very beginning of this process about how workers in the sanitation service are treated sometimes, and the pressure that they have to make these schedules, which is why we end up with trucks on our road at like 5 a.m. or 9 p.m. at night. And so I'm a little disappointed that I did not see that in here. I know that you just came this week, so I'm not saying that it was your fault, but so I'm a little concerned about that. I would also like to know a little bit more about the recycling service. I have come to understand that whoever gets the contract will have to contract out with someone else to do recycling, but that's an entirely different industry, and so I'm not clear how that is happening. I've also been told that when doing recycling, you cannot commingle garbage and recycling. They can't even use the same trucks. So that is a concern. And I did not know that much about advanced disposal before this week, and I've been trying to get information about them. I don't know anywhere that they do residential service, and so it might be that they're getting all of these trucks and all of these cans because they don't do the service anywhere. So that's a little concerning for me. What I would like is a little bit more information from all three companies about how they're going to do their recycling, as well as information on what cities they currently operate in. I think it would be wise for us as a council if we could talk to other cities to see how they like the services that they're providing before we obligate ourselves. I mean, I don't know, my question is, how long is the contract? If we vote yes, how long are we obligating ourselves before we could change if we find out that we don't like the service?
So I think part of that I can answer as well, but I think we also want to make sure we understand the scope that we're asking for and the delivery. And so when you start talking about the wages and their day-to-day operations, some of those things are outside of your purview as a city, but at the same time, we have those concerns, and so during the interview, the presentations, during the procurement process, we address a lot of these activities. I'd also say, though furthermore, is that a consideration when it comes to the number of trucks that they put on the road as a part of their service model to address everything from residential to recycling, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, with the contract, while you may enter into contracts for extended period of time, I think one of the things that our attorney has shared to us previously, not only for this contract, but for others, is that by state law, these contracts are from year to year. So even though you do a multiple year contract, the city's obligation is from year to year, where you have to re-up those contracts. And I think that's Georgia law.
Thank you. So I'll yield to the procurement experts on all of those other issues. Is it possible to find out what cities they are operating in currently?
I think we have that.
Yes, the references were a part of the solicitation and part of each vendor's responses. So that can be supplemented. And
So, Mr. Kerr, you answered
yes,
yes.
each vendor did provide a list of local cities and
You can
advance.
provide that to the council.
Yes, I can provide that to the council.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kerr. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council.
All right, Mr. Perkins.
The next item is a presentation on opportunities in economic development being made by Elmer Stancil from Dentons.
You're right, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's great to be here this evening. I was asked to give a little bit of a presentation on Dentons and our capabilities for the city of South Fulton as it relates to economic development. I'll briefly talk a little bit about my background. I talk a little bit about Dentons and then some of our successes, and would provide an opportunity for questions at the end. As we look through the first page of the presentation, just want to clearly define what economic development is. That term is used for a lot of things, but I think as we define it at Dentons, and as we help entities with economic development, it's a process in which communities improve economic well-being of the community through efforts that entail job creation, job retention, tax base enhancements, and quality of life. And that's a definition from the International Economic Development Council. A little bit about my background. I've been in economic development for about 15 years. Began with the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is an organization, as you may know, designed to help drive economic development through business meetings, conventions, and tourism. I then went to the Georgia Department of Economic Development and spent about 9 years with the Department of Economic Development. I was involved in the business recruitment and business retention efforts at the department through policy, and helped the commissioner and the governor with policy initiatives that help grow jobs and investment in the state. And that involved, at the Georgia Department of Economic Development, that involved tourism, both traditional economic development, business retention, business recruitment, workforce development, and film and music industry, and was involved in policy efforts in all of those areas. I was also involved with the Georgia Economic Developers Association, which is a organization of local economic developers from all around the state. Had an opportunity to meet and network with a lot of the individuals that create jobs in their communities and represent their communities all over the state. And spent a little bit of time at the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority and State Road and Tollway Authority, and worked in the state's efforts to include transportation and transit in economic development. But then began at Dentons. Dentons is a global law firm, and we have tremendous presence around the globe. In fact, we're the largest global law firm. We began from the firm that you may recognize here in Atlanta. About 2.5–3 years ago, we merged with Dentons. We were McKenna, Long and Aldridge, and before that, Long, Aldridge, and Norman. So we have an Atlanta presence, a Georgia presence, that have merged with a global leader. And from the image there, you can see that we have offices in over 70 countries and 165 cities around the globe. And we utilize that network in order to help our clients with economic development opportunities, both foreign direct investment and trade from a global perspective. And then within the country, you can see our offices and presence there. So it's a matter of connecting our clients and our client relationships and the relationships that we have all around the world in order to turn those into economic development opportunities for our clients. So jurisdictions all over the world compete for economic development opportunities. So there's a tremendous amount of competition in the market. We provide our clients with expertise and capitalize on some of those opportunities I mentioned. We are renowned for recognizing and understanding the intersection of law, business, and public finance and government, all things that are needed in order to create an environment where jobs and investment can grow. We draw on experience from a number of different sectors from within our firm, including, as you can see there, real estate, finance, corporate and regulatory practices. So we pull expertise from a number of different divisions from within our firm. We also have a 50-state network of connected individuals that help us provide intelligence and alerts of things that are happening in economic development, the economic development world, best practices that we can introduce to our clients and help them develop. As I mentioned earlier, we have presence in over 73 countries and 167 cities around the world, and with over 8,800 attorneys around the globe. We have experience in a lot of the mechanisms in which are really needed, the tools in the toolbox that economic developers need in order to create jobs and investment. Things like tax allocation districts, community improvement districts, property tax abatement process, which is a unique process in Georgia. Also, the partnerships and the relationships that we have, we help our clients by leveraging those relationships that we have. I'll give you some examples of some of the successes that we've had over the years in economic development. The next few pages are just an example of that. My colleague Steve Labowitz is here this evening and would be glad to answer any questions on some of the clients that we've served in the past, and you can see the list there and some of the things that we've done in order to help those clients. And then lastly, I'll close with some of our regional clients. As you can see there, we've been involved in the Atlanta metro area for a very long time and helped a lot of both local governments and companies grow jobs and investment. But would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. We have met with staff and are excited to present some of the capabilities that we have in order to help the city of South Fulton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stancil.
If you don't mind, I would like to kind of just chime in on this a little bit. So definitely the reason why I asked Mr. Stancil or Elmer to come today, oh, it's not on, I apologize. The reason I asked Mr. Stancil to come today, I think through not only council's, really focus as I got here on economic development. I think we had a very robust economic development forum recently. I know we'll have some training coming up. And even in addition to that, looking at what our citizens have kind of said through the budget forums is that economic development right behind public safety is really one of the top priorities of the city. And so, luckily through my experiences, I've been able to work with Elmer as members of the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And as we have kind of talked offline and looked at different ways to bring new tools to the city, I thought it was important to kind of highlight really what type of tools are available, including tax abatements, TADs, and some of those things that will help push the city forward without really investing our own limited capital and having a partner that would allow us to be able to get things done at the state level with a track record of success. And so I think, I know he didn't dive as much into it to allow you guys to ask questions, but I think it's really important for us to look at some of those past successes like Atlantic Station, which is the gold standard for TADs, as well as some of the current work that's happening at Union City and some of our neighbors that they're also working on. For the first time, it appears in South Fulton County that at the state level, there's an appetite to support the type of economic development that you and your citizens want. And I thought it'd be important for them to come and just kind of talk about what type of opportunities are available.
Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you for your presentation. I just would ask my colleagues to look at some of the major projects that they have been involved in, and to just tell you that recently I've been attending a lot of the economic development meetings in the region, and the cities around us are moving. They're moving, and we gotta get a seat at a lot of these tables, and we gotta think bigger, because people are planning and building around us.
Any other comments? Hearing none, thank you for your presentation. Mr. Kerr.
Your next item is a presentation of the Aerotropolis Greenway draft plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kirsten Moat. I'm with the Aerotropolis Atlanta Community Improvement District. I came before you in April with an update to our Greenway plan, so I do not want to take very much time tonight, but I do want to just remind everybody of the plan and announce that we do have the draft report available. Staff should, if they haven't already, will be sending out a link to the draft plan for your review. And so I just wanted to come back and do a brief reminder of the plan as you go into the review process. If you recall, we started this project last year about this time, and we knew it was going to take about 12 months. So here we are in the final report stage. I will be returning before you for formal adoption of this plan so that we can be eligible for future funding. But I will not do so until after we receive all the comments, so that's more likely September or October timeframe. The project scope was built on the Aerotropolis Atlanta Alliance Blueprint, which was approved in 2016 and looks at the communities around Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport. And we looked at existing trails, topography, what would require land acquisition. We looked at what some strategies would be and some policies. And most importantly, we wanted a plan that was supported by all of the communities. We calculated it. I don't think I had this slide the last time, but we calculated all of the proposed trails and came up that we are proposing 350 miles of trails, which is aggressive, but could be accomplished with the partnerships between the CID, the Alliance, all the cities, as well as the airport. This map shows the priorities that were provided to us by our local communities and staff within the local communities. I presented this at the meeting in April. And then these were the model miles that were selected based on a variety of criteria, one of them being ease of implementation. So we wanted to select model miles that would be able to be implemented within a short time frame to really jumpstart this program. And for the city of South Fulton, the model mile was identified as the Wolf Creek Trail along Camp Creek and along Camp Creek Parkway or nearby Camp Creek Parkway. And we have details for all of the model miles for each of the communities, and all of this is in the draft report. We also put together some renderings. This will help kind of develop the vision of what we see. So this is the one that the consultants put together for the Wolf Creek Trail. So for the remaining schedule, I'm asking that any comments you may have, you can provide to me by August 30th. My email address is on this slide, but it's kmoat@aerocids.com. And then, as I mentioned, I'll present the final report for your consideration and action in September or October of this year. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Mr. Willis.
Do you mind sending us the PDF document? We were sent the link, but a lot of us are having problems accessing the document. I didn't get the PDF. Did you all?
We resent it.
Okay, maybe
Yeah,
I'll go back and look.
we'll resend it again, but yeah, we sent it
Okay.
out last night, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll go back and look.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Khalid.
I know with these trail plans, I'd asked Shannon after the last meeting, we have to purchase some right of ways, maybe not for the model mile, but I'm just wondering, do you have any estimates like by the city, like what our right of way would be? And the second part is, I understand that East Point has actually already purchased all of theirs, so I would love for you to just tell us about how they did that.
Sure. So yes, that's correct. Not every segment of this trail system is going to be within the right-of-way. Some right-of-way purchase may be necessary for certain segments. We did not calculate out exact right-of-way costs because they vary so much between jurisdictions. We do have a per-mile cost for the type of facility, but it doesn't include right-of-way or other enhancements such as lighting. But all of those costs are in the report. We'll have to look at specific segments and what those right-of-way costs may be. We try to minimize the right-of-way costs by doing on-road facilities and shared facilities as necessary, but there are some, like along rivers and streams, that provide more of a recreation benefit that may require some right-of-way purchase. The city of East Point actually did their own Greenway Trail Master Plan, and they adopted that in 2017. And so we actually just incorporated all of their recommendations into this plan. There was not any additional analysis done on the East Point Trail system. They knew going into the T-SPLOS that they wanted to provide some funding for their trail system, and that is what they've used as their funding mechanism for their model mile. Their T-SPLOS, yes. And I do believe that that could be a potential funding mechanism for all of the cities in South Fulton for the next cycle of T-SPLOS. But also in the draft plan, we do go into potential funding mechanisms that can be used for trail systems.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir.
I remember at one time in Fulton County that we did have a trail system plan. And we acquired, we acquired properties. I think we were going to Chattanooga. We were about 8 parcels shy. And a lot of that trail plan included easements to make connections. I would think that we could ask Fulton County, and that you guys don't know where it is, but that would give us a copy of the trail plan that we had during that time.
I have a copy of it.
You do?
And I can, send it to everybody. I've been meaning to take it somewhere and get it copied because it's a lot of pages, but I have a copy.
And I think that we need to go back and take a look at that.
Right.
And then, like East Point, physically, look at what we already got and decide how we're going to do it. Because it was an outstanding plan. Okay, any other further questions? If not, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we go into executive session for personnel, litigation, and real estate.
Do you have any litigation matters?
I do.
Okay, good. All right. All those in favor? Let's go to the executive session.